Hi, welcome to Girl Geek X Elevate, our first virtual event for the Girl Geek Dinner community. My name is Angie Chang, CEO and founder of Girl Geek X, and this is Ruta Bajoria. We wanted to say thank you for joining us this Wednesday morning for our Girl Geek X Elevate. We have been hosting Girl Geek dinners here in the Bay Area for over 10 years. We've hosted over 170 dinners at over 100 companies. And we are excited to be able to expand and have world domination. So when we thought about 10 years of Girl Geek dinners, we wanted to rebrand and say, it's going to become Girl Geek X. X is for the community, our community of 15,000 women. It is not just dinners, it's events and podcasts and webinars and different formats that can help us reach more women globally. Our community women has grown over the last 10 years, and we've heard lots of feedback from women that want to tune in to last night's dinner by podcast on their drive to work, or when they want to tune in from where they are, which is not necessarily where we are in San Francisco. We've also taken this chance and this opportunity to partner with mission-aligned companies. And today we're grateful to have the support of fantastic mission-aligned sponsors like Mozilla, the US Digital Service, PayPal, Salesforce, Intel AI, Clever, Quantcast, and Interview.io.
Is that me now, Miss Angie?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Gretchen Diekenicker, COO here. So to build on kind of what Angie was saying on how we are looking to change things going forward and expand, we're very excited that we worked very, very hard to have our speakers from a wide range of backgrounds today. 70% are women of color and 40% are Black and Latina. And we had a very special focus on that. We wanted to make sure that we're bringing underrepresented voices to the table. We've always done the whole thing was to create opportunities for women to gain visibility and recognition and to share with the community. And I think at this particular time in history, it's really important as we get a seat at the table as women that we pull up another chair and that we be very mindful of, the limitations that are greater than just being a woman and the challenges. So just being more supportive there. We do want to have more voices at our table, and we'd also, we'd like to invite in ideas on bringing more women of color into the fold. Your guys' ideas on how do we partner and bring more male allies in. These are all things that we're going to be focusing on now that we're on the other side of this event. So part of wanting to do this particular event was, like Angie said, to reach more people, but also to, another thing that we've heard is mid to senior level career women aren't necessarily represented strongly at the events, which is understandable, right? People have other things to do in the evenings. But we wanted to create this opportunity because as you sort of grow in your career, the theme today is growing from a manager to a leader. So what happens when you become a manager of managers? And every single stage of your career, the job is completely different. And so we have some great sessions today to kind of help everybody on that journey. We've got one on self-awareness and ego with Minji Wong. We have one on the art of the interview, especially around the candidates interviewing you with Aline Lerner from Interview.io. We'll talk about delegation and empowerment and advocacy with Arquay coming up just after Kathy, and planning and goals and finding those metrics that matter. How do you lead by metrics when you're not doing the work yourself and you're not in there every single day? And I think we'll get into that a little bit at the engineering panel near the end of the day. So, Sukrita?
Yeah, hi. I'm actually so excited because I'm seeing people dialed in from like everywhere, all over the world. How cool. I saw people dialed in from San Francisco, Florida, and I also saw someone comment on our shared earbuds. So
what?
glad to provide the entertainment as well. for me, like why we're even wanting to do this, especially have technical women give talks, not just about leadership, but also about, the biggest, most important things to talk about in tech. We have talks about security, machine learning, and, just keeping yourself up to date in terms of your technical skills. And why is this important is because when I got into tech, I just didn't see enough role models, women on stage talking about, what it's like to be working in technology beyond just what it's like to be a woman in tech. So we have speakers from Facebook, from LinkedIn, from Salesforce who are going to be, providing their insights, their experiences, and hopefully you'll all have, not just, lessons learned, but also you'll also leave with inspiration today to keep at it and keep going forward with it. So with that, I'm super excited to introduce Kathy, who's our next first speaker. So who's going to be speaking next?
Good morning, everyone.
Yeah, so really quickly, I wanted to introduce Kathy. Kathy is the CTO of Stitch Fix, which is awesome. Kathy and I first met when Kathy was working at Salesforce as an SVP. She's going to talk about, her journey. And what I really definitely want to call out is right now she leads the engineering team at Stitch Fix and supports the company's efforts to deliver services that meet the client's needs. Kathy has been working in great companies like Yahoo and Amazon, and of course, Salesforce, where we met. And so Kathy, go ahead. I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Fantastic, thanks. And thanks for this opportunity. I just really appreciate having an opportunity to network and talk with other women. I just got back from a board effect meeting 2 weeks ago where we were talking about needing more women representation on boards and more women representation in the industry. And as many of you all know, we've come really far. We're seeing a lot more women in the industry. But as the numbers come back, they can be kind of depressing. That even though the number of women in software, in technology organizations has grown, the percentages haven't changed that dramatically over the last decade. So I hope we can work together to build a more inclusive community and support system. And I wanted to share my story of how I got to be from a kid who grew up in Pittsburgh, working my way through to be a software developer and now to a CTO at Stitch Fix. It's hard not to be able to see everyone here, but so I'm not sure how many of you know of Stitch Fix. I'm hoping that there's a lot of clients out there, but I'm sure there's many of you who may have heard of Stitch Fix, but don't quite know what we do. So let me just start a little bit with that, so you can get a sense of what I do on a day-to-day basis. Stitch Fix is really, yay for Stitch Fix. Stitch Fix is really disrupting how people can find clothes and items that they love and look and feel their best every single day. So as many of you probably have shifted your buying behaviors to online, I'm the same way. I hate going shopping. Before I even learned about Stitch Fix, almost all of my purchasing was done online. I never really go to the store. And yet, when I've tried to buy clothes online, it's a really broken experience. There's so much that goes in your head on when you walk into a store, what items you think that look good for you and match your style preferences. And there's so many things that go in your head when you walk into a dressing room to figure out whether something looks good on you, your complexion, your body type. And there's a lot that goes into thinking about your wallet and your price preferences for whether you'll take that item and spend that money to go to check out. And so when you go online and try to buy something, you get a flat image, you may get a review, but you won't really know if that person is like you, if they have the same style preferences that you may have, or the same body type. And so Stitch Fix is really disrupting that business. You fill out a detailed style profile. It's kind of like a dating profile. There's everything that goes in your mind for what you do when you're walking into a store, and what things generally work for you and what things don't. And then you get paired up with a personal stylist who takes that information paired with tons and tons of algorithms and data science with detailed recommendations that are tailored exactly for you to pick items that will work for you. And you get a box delivered to your door. You don't know what's going to show up in that box. You open it, try it on at home, hopefully find things that you love, but easily return things back that you don't, and you only pay for what you keep. And this was just so disruptive when I really got behind the scenes to learn about this business model and what it was doing and how we were impacting clients' lives, that I was really excited to join this group, and I'm now the CTO. My role expands across engineering, IT, product management, and security. So it's a pretty expansive role, and every day I get to do something different, and I'm learning new things as well. And so I just feel very fortunate to have this job and to work with such amazing women here at the company. But I wanted to talk to you about my path to get here. It hasn't always been easy, but I've had a lot of support along the way. And I wanted to talk to you about things that I've learned along that path and support systems that I've really benefited from that we can also help others along the way as well. So I mentioned I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I was in elementary school in the early 80s, and no one had computers at home. Personal computers were just spinning up, and the Apple IIs were kind of starting to make an entrance into elementary schools. And what's amazing is that Apple really wanted to nurture that community. They were giving grants out to schools and donating computers to elementary schools. I heard that they even had a surplus of Apple IIs when they launched the Macintosh, and so they were really thinking about how they can use that for good. And I was one of the beneficiaries of that. My school took advantage of those programs and created a computer lab. And my teachers loved it. Every week we had a computer lab time where we got to go to the lab and learn computer programming. And my first language was Logo, which was a little tiny triangle on the screen, kind of like the predated Scratch. And you can draw little pictures. You could draw boxes and houses, and you made simple commands, but it was a real programming language. You could do loops, and you can do procedures. And it really started that spark for me of what technology could be. And I carried that forward for quite some time, even though after elementary school, there were no real programs for me. Our middle school and our high school really didn't have many computer classes. But in high school, I was told about a program at Carnegie Mellon, which was near where I lived in Pittsburgh, for a summer program for computer science. And I applied and got accepted for the program, and it was amazing. The morning was taught by a computer science professor at CMU. It was about algorithms and data structures, and the afternoon was special projects where I got to see an arm and try to program an arm robot to make knots and do some object-oriented programming to make and solve mazes. And after that summer, I really thought that this was something that I was interested in and that I'd want to pursue. And I had a lot of encouragement away through the professor that I got to meet at CMU, who talked to me about colleges and talked to me about studying computer science going forward. And so that spark that I had through both teachers and professors really carried me a long way to thinking about this field, because frankly, a lot of people of my generation, a lot of women in my generation are only here because of having that spark from someone else, generally a family member. There's generally someone, a dad, an uncle, even a mom who was a scientist or someone in the field, and I didn't have that. But the teachers and the professors that I did engage with really were my spark to enter into the field. Fast forward, I went to a small liberal arts school in Philadelphia, Swarthmore College, and studied computer science. Had a lot of support there for programs around women in technology. And then when I graduated in '99, it was the peak of the .com boom, and off I went to Seattle to work at Amazon.com. And it was quite an amazing ride. And just every month we were launching new stores. The growth was pretty crazy. The company growth was amazing as well. It was not easy, as I was one of the few women. Certainly on my first team, I was the only woman. But I did find my little support group. I had friends that I got to meet, people who helped me through that way as I was trying to figure out a team that worked for me. And I'm forever grateful for that. I was also there during the rocky bubble burst of the .com industry, and I thought that I'd missed the interesting times at Amazon, and I wanted to leave and go see what it was like to work in an early stage startup. So I left Amazon, came down to the Bay Area, worked for a small startup, saw it go up and down, and realized it's not fun to work on software that doesn't get used. And I swung to much bigger companies since. I went to Oracle right after, which was probably a little bit of an overcompensation. But it was there that I really was starting to do team leading and thinking about being an engineering manager. And a piece of, I have a fun story about that of I just happened to be meeting with an old friend, and was telling him that I was interested in being an engineering manager, and that I was thinking that I might transition to doing that within the next couple of quarters. It wasn't going to happen immediately. But I didn't think anything of it. And then 3 weeks later, he calls me up and said, "Hey, there's a position open for an engineering manager at Yahoo that I think you'd be a great fit for. You should apply." And that just really surprised me. I never thought that another company would consider me for an engineering manager, since I had never been an engineering manager. And it never would have happened if I hadn't shared that story and spark with the friend of mine. So it's advice that I give a lot of people is to be really free and in sharing what your passions and interests are. You never know what opportunities are out there, and people will see you in a different light when you share those aspirations. So figure out things that you want to try, figure out things that you might want to do, and then tell people. It may be a different technology that you want to try, or a new project that hasn't even been spun up for your company, but your manager or your colleagues may look at you in a different light when those other opportunities come out, and think of you as the perfect person for that fit. So fast forward, I went to Yahoo. It was the most trafficked site on the internet when I was there, ahead of Google. It was a pretty vibrant time when I first arrived. But kind of got rocky. I had my first baby there, and I was working on a really tough project as we were revamping our ad network and really trying to figure out what was coming next for the business. And I'd say one of my lowest points of my career happened there, where I came back full force after maternity leave. I was excited to be back. I was excited to work on new projects. I even raised my hand to work on this brand new project that was revamping this architecture. But several months after that, I was realizing things just weren't working. I was really unhappy. I was not feeling like I was being a good employee, not feeling like I was being a good mom. I've always felt like I was just chasing to get home in time to relieve the babysitter, and my baby had stopped eating. I was breastfeeding and pumping at work, and even though I had a good enough supply, she was gradually drinking less and less milk every single day. And so I felt like this just isn't working. I need to figure something else out, because I don't feel like I'm doing either job well from being a great engineering leader or a great mom. And so I quit. I went to my boss, and I said I was going to be quitting, and I made up some story about doing some other project. And to my surprise, they all tried to convince me not to leave. So my boss really asked me a lot of questions. I hadn't really felt like I was doing that good of a job. And so it was really surprising to me at first that that they would make all of these overtures to keep me to stay. Other peers and leaders also came to talk to me. And then finally, the VP of the business came to talk to me. And if someone hadn't really engaged with that often, but he asked a lot of insightful questions, and I was really trying not to go into details or trying to make it into a way that they would convince me to stay. But he got to a point and he said, Kathy, I don't feel like you're asking for what you want or what you need. And that really struck me. I was like, and then he paused and he said, I don't know if I can give you what you want or you need, but you're not even giving me the chance. And so if you can think about what it would take for you to be happy and successful, let us know and give us a chance to make that right. And that was just such a powerful moment for me. And I was like, wow. It was the same advice that someone had given me before about sharing things that I need and want for transitioning into being an engineering manager. But it was that same advice in a very different context for me when I was going through a really difficult time in my job. And so I really took a step back and said, hey, I'm trying to do too many things. I'm trying to be this amazing engineering leader and get the next promotion. I'm also trying to figure things out with my baby. I'm trying to travel to the different sites for these leaders. And I just was like, I just need to figure out sequencing and not try to do too much at once. So I pared things back. I said, I'm not going to do these travel trips for the next 3 months. I also flew my mom out, and she helped me with my baby while I looked for a new childcare provider. And I got through those next 3 months, and I decided to stay. And what happened after that is I got into this groove. Things were doing much better for my baby. Things were much easier for my job. I figured out how to do both of them a different way than I was doing it in the past. But that it really helped, I think, potentially even save me to stay in the industry in a time that was pretty difficult. And it was really thanks to that VP, Sandeep, who had that conversation with me and made me look at things a different way. So fast forward, I then went, as Yahoo had a lot of difficult times, I was looking for what's next, and I had my eyes set on Salesforce. I came into Salesforce and I got to work on a lot of different really great initiatives. But I also got to see a different company that was really focused on giving back. And it made me think about that time at Apple, that how they influence specific education and schools and students studying computers. Where Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, really wanted to think about how he could give back by not just being a company that makes a lot of money, but also is really successful in helping the community at large. So he created a 1-1-1 model. 1% of time, 1% of equity, 1% of the products were given to nonprofits. And I think that this is something that we can all think about, of how we can use the power of the institutions that we work for to make a difference in our broader community, helping to support other girls, helping women in technology, persons of color, helping with diversity and equality. I think there's something that really I feel that I've benefited for, and I would like to roll forward to others. I learned a lot working there, and I also feel like I had a lot of advantages working for a company who really cared about equality. So Mark had a program when I was there. He had a quarterly leadership meeting. It was called Ecom at the time, and he would bring in his leaders and go business by business through all the financials of the company. And at one point, he looked around the room and he said, "Where are all the women?" Maybe in a chuckle or two. But after that meeting, he said, "No, we need to fix this. I want 30% of the women, 30% of the room for all of my meetings to have women in them." It didn't mean that the people who normally would have been invited didn't get to come. It meant that another seat was pulled up to the table. And I really liked what Gretchen was saying about just pulling up another chair is really what gives people different opportunities and advantages. And I got that opportunity at Salesforce. I was invited to some meetings with really high-level leaders at the company. And I got to listen in and engage and think and learn how the company was operating at that level. And that really helped prepare me for this role as a CTO. And I think that's something that we can all think about, is how can we pull up another seat at the table to give people an opportunity to see what's going on in your meetings, to see what's going on in your company, and to have broader access in this industry. So fast forward, I'm now at Stitch Fix. It is an amazing job. It's great to be in this role. It's something that I've always aspired to do and to be. But what I never aspired and had hoped to work for is a company that has such high gender diversity. So Stitch Fix is 84% women, which is just amazing. Every day I walk into rooms that are completely surrounded by such amazing women. And that's something that was so different than any other company that I've ever worked. I've been used to being one of the only women in the room, where I've gone and done the count and said, wow, what percentage of women are here today? And I've stopped doing that. After being in a room with 60% women and 70% women and 45% women, it kind of, you don't really need to do the count anymore. And what I found, what's amazing when you have that level of gender diversity, is that you can really be your authentic self. I remember early on in my career just wanting to fit in and be one of the guys. I wore t-shirts and jeans and wanted to kind of be appreciated for my technology and not stand out as different than anyone else. And now I get to work dresses every day. I get to be myself. I don't have to think about how I'm phrasing things or to couch my thought process or argument in a different way to fit in with the culture of the company. I feel like when you have a broader diversity group, everybody can just be themselves and focus on the business, focus on the clients, focus on how to make a difference. And that's what's exciting to me. So I love working at big scale companies. I love working at growing teams, growing technology, growing architecture, shipping software. And that's what I get to do every day here. We're in this amazing growth phase at Stitch Fix, where we're launching new business lines, where we're growing our business. And it's the technology that you see on the website, but it's also everything that goes underneath it to power it, from tools to run our warehouse to tools for our styling organization, and tools also for merchandise, so how we pick and buy and plan and allocate the right inventory for our business. So I love wearing t-shirts and jeans sometimes too, and I love wearing dresses, and I love that I can choose. And my aspiration going forward for this industry is that we can all be our authentic selves at work, that we can be recognized for what we do, and that I'm seen as just, I hope that I'm seen as a great CTO, as a great technology leader, and not just a female CTO. And that my aspiration is that there are many more of you who rise to these levels as well, and that we can form a great community and support network. So I think that's essentially my story that I wanted to share today. And I think, Sukrita, we may have wanted to open things up for some questions. If anyone has any questions and you want to type them in, feel free. Oh, there you are. Hello.
Yeah, so hi. I was looking at everybody's comments. A lot of people were talking about, how they're loving your story and the honesty with which you're sharing it. I see a question asking about who your current inspiration is.
I have to say my biggest inspiration right now is my CEO, Katrina Lake. Katrina was a young CEO founder who came up with this idea while she was in business school. She was fascinated by e-commerce disruptions and this sense that the apparel industry was one of the few industries that had not reached double-digit online sales while she, even 6 or 7 years ago. The sense of the reason is because the model was broken and that she had an idea for a different way and a different model. It has not been easy for her. As a young female CEO, going to Sandhill to raise money was not a cakewalk. And so she really focused on how she could get to profitability as fast as possible so she wasn't dependent on that industry. And the thing about her is she is just such an authentic leader. She is so smart and savvy, but does not put on airs, and is really someone that I've watched her as she's had her first baby and navigated the world of pumping and nursing and things that I kind of hid behind. I remember one of my stories of pumping and while I'm eating and having a one-on-one and someone saying what's that noise in the background? And I'm like, what noise? I don't hear any noise. And not really being that authentic about what was going on and what I needed, really just trying to hide what was going on. And that's something that I don't think she even has thought twice about hiding anything about. She's just not trying to be a role model as much as just authentically is navigating that aspect of being a mom and being an amazing CEO.
That's awesome. Someone also pointed out about the fact that there was a podcast where Katrina shared her story. But I do see a lot of questions, speaking to your story about Mark Benioff noticing not enough gender diversity and then, trying to make a difference. So how does one who's not in that, level of influence, so how would somebody else who would get impacted by a change like that, how would they bring about the influence when they're not in the seat of power? So what advice would you have for people like that?
I think we can all try to help at whatever level that we're in. Really raising this as an issue to your boss, or thinking about ideas, how you can help, whether it's the community or a local university that's near you. Maybe it's letting people shadow you in your job and bringing a seat at the table. And then it's also the opposite of asking. So asking, hey, can I come to this meeting? I think that I think people, it may not always work out for you, but it will never work out if you don't ask. And so really being able to assert yourself and to see if another seat could be brought to that table.
That's awesome. And next question, and I'm seeing people asking, a lot of people asking similar questions. So I'm just summarizing the next question. It seems like a lot of people want to know, how do you identify when is the right time to, jump at an opportunity or, navigate towards a specific opportunity to sort of grow in your career?
I'd say that the thing that I've always done is to try to look at what are the big opportunities out there that no one is going after, and being open to them. So I think I was going to talk a little about managing up and the aspect that has worked for me both as a manager, but also as a strong number two to other of my leaders is to really open myself up to understanding what are the big challenges that my boss is having at any given time and see how I can make a difference. What are the big charters and what are the big opportunities that we're going after? What are the gaps that I see, and how can I lean in to make myself available when there's challenges? And so I feel like that's always helped me. Whether there's a brand new initiative that got spun up, or someone's leaving the company, or someone's moving to a new role and there's a gap in the organization, really saying hey, how can I help? Is there something that I can be doing here? I'd love to take a shot at helping on these projects. And the way that I've always been able to do that is to build a great team. I love to delegate and hire the best people that I can. and load them up as much as possible in the same way. And then that gives me the space and the capacity to take on more when I am in a growing opportunity that that needs more help.
I see. So one quick comment I do want to add is that people are asking for all of your questions to be posted in the Ask a Question list. So just in case you've been posting them in the chat, but not in the Ask a Question list, if you put it there, people can vote. And next is actually one of my favorite questions. So how, there are like 9 and counting votes for people wanting to hear more about the differences in responsibilities and duties of being a software developer, like an individual contributor versus a CTO. And since transitioned between those roles, what is the main differentiator, do you think, or the biggest challenge?
Well, let's just talk about software developer versus manager, because it is this really interesting thing that the things that help you be most successful as an engineer are not necessarily the things that you need to do once you're an engineering manager. And that's something that we're not sure. We talk about that a lot at my staff meeting is that true for a lot of other fields? Because I get the impression that that dynamic is not always as clear as it is in software development. When you're focusing a lot on how you're working on coding and projects and building up your technology skills, those things are great and important to lean on so that you understand the projects are going on track. But there's a whole other aspect of how you're managing people and projects and initiatives that you don't necessarily always get to do as an individual contributor. And so it was a very challenging and different experience for me, but one that I really loved. I feel like as a software developer, you get these CS highs, you solve some problem, you are excited about getting to a solution that works and that you can push out and deploy. And that's just exciting that you get to see that solution, you get to see people using it, and you get to see the difference that you're making. When you're a manager and you're not actually writing the hands-on code and influencing through people, things take longer. You can't always see of like, hey, I'm trying to give people advice and coaching them in this way. Am I getting through to them? Is this working? Am I shifting the team to be better or not? It's not that you can see that on a day-to-day basis, but that your impact is much broader. And if you can stick through it and realize that it's not the same as that every day, every hour, a continuous feedback loop, that you find other ways to feel, to see your impact, and that you can be really proud of the people and lives that you can influence. And so that's what I really love about the job, is that I can have a broader influence, and every day is different. As I mentioned, I'm working on a lot of different types of projects, a lot of different types of focus. And I think that that's the thing that also changes as you take on more and more teams, as you go from being a manager to a manager of managers or a CTO. I was saying as I was making that shift, things when you're a software developer can go quite fast. You can like have a great day and then you can have a bad day, but depending on the big challenge or bug or issue that you're dealing with, things are a little slower as an engineering manager. You kind of see the challenges and you're working towards fixing them, or you're seeing things working really well and they stay pretty well for quite some time. But when you have a larger scope of influence with teams that suddenly don't have much commonality between them, you can go from one meeting and think like, oh, wow, things are finally coming together for this group and I can see the light at the end of the tunnel and things are going great. And then you go into a whole different meeting and you're like, oh, now I have this other problem that I, have been neglecting that I really need to help nurture. And so it's just a different pacing, and just being open to those shifts, I think, are really important, and to finding different people to get advice from, because those jobs change quite dramatically.
Yeah, totally. I can totally relate because I'm going through that as well myself. But thank you so much, Kathy. I wanted to thank you from the bottom of our heart to get started with what's our first ever virtual conference. Your talk was so inspiring. We see it through the comments and we feel it too. And, all of the questions that came in, thank you for asking those questions.
Thank you. Thank you for organizing this, and thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Over to Gretchen.